Some things in the dark don't just watch, they call to you. They know your name. They sound like your family, your friends, like the people you trust. But when you step closer, when you answer back, that's when you realize, too late, that it's not them at all. 15 years ago, at my family's remote cabin in northern Alberta, something lured us into the woods. It used my cousin's voice. It called for help. And if we had followed it, we wouldn't have come back. This is the night we came face to face with something we were never meant to see. There are stories that stay with you. Stories that claw their way back into your mind, no matter how much time has passed. This is one of them. It was the summer I turned 7. Every year, my family gathered at our remote cabin by Island Lake, a tiny wooden shack swallowed by the forest. No neighbors, no streetlights, just us and the deep, endless woods. During the day, it was paradise, fishing, swimming, running through the trees. But at night, the forest changed. It felt different, heavier, silent, as if it was watching us. And that summer, we learned it was. That night, we were playing hide and seek, our favorite game. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, and the wind rustled a thick canopy overhead. We ran, our tiny flashlights flickering in the vast darkness, finding hiding spots among the roots and shadows. I crouched behind a fallen log, heart pounding, giggling under my breath. Then, my oldest cousin, Lisa, suddenly appeared. She wasn't laughing. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. She grabbed my arm. "Mike," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Do you see that?" At first, I thought it was a trick, but then I saw it. A figure, a shadow between the trees. It was tall, too tall, at least 7 feet, its form blending with the darkness, and its eyes, 2 red pinpricks burning through the black. I felt my breath catch. A wolf? A bear? Number. It was standing too still. It wasn't moving. It wasn't breathing. It was watching. Then Lisa squeezed my arm tighter. Her voice trembled. "Where's my sister?" Then we heard it. A voice. "Mike, Mike, I see you. Come over here." It was soft, familiar. It was my cousin's voice. But she wasn't there. The voice came from the trees, right where the shadow stood. Lisa's grip tightened. "That's not her." The voice called again. This time it was wrong. Distorted, stretched, like someone was choking on the words. My body locked up. My instincts screamed, "Don't go, don't answer." Then, "Boo!" A scream ripped from my throat as my cousin jumped out from behind the outhouse, laughing. But I wasn't laughing. Because when I turned back to the shadow, it was grinning. That grin was wrong. A stretched, unnatural thing, filled with jagged, needle-like teeth. The red eyes glowed brighter. The game was over. We ran, tripping over roots, crashing through branches, barely able to breathe. The laughter followed us. Not our cousin's laughter, but something else. Something low, guttural, mocking. Just as we reached the cabin, I made a mistake. I looked back. It was under the stairs. It crouched beneath the first few steps, waiting, watching. Had it been following us, pretending to be my cousin? The door slammed. I hid under my blankets, shaking. But just before I fell asleep, a sound, a low, breathy laugh. And then, silence. We never saw it again, never spoke of it again. And when I ask my cousins about that night, they laugh. As if they don't remember. But I know what I saw. And if we had listened to that voice, we wouldn't have come back. Halloween is supposed to be a night of mischief and fun. A night where the veil between the living and the dead feels thinner. But sometimes, the real horror doesn't come from ghosts or monsters. It comes from the living. I learned this the hard way, one fateful Halloween night, when a familiar customer at the cafe where I worked turned out to be something much worse than I ever imagined. A predator lurking in the shadows, watching, waiting, and leaving behind a message that sent ice through my veins. Growing up in a dysfunctional family, I found solace in books. My mother, instead of dragging us to church, took us to Barnes & Noble every Sunday to feed her addiction to romance novels. As kids, we devoured stacks of children's books, comics, and YA novels. Over time, I fell in love with the place, dreaming of one day working there. Years later, in 2012, that dream became a reality. I became a cafe server, a natural at making lattes and cappuccinos. But what I didn't realize was that someone had been watching me. Someone who knew my routine better than I did. He was a regular, a man in his 50s, bald but gray-stubbled, always seated at the same table with his laptop. He never spoke much, just ordered the same drink, white chocolate mocha, sickeningly sweet, over and over. At first, I barely noticed him, but my coworkers did. They told me how he would throw away his drink, untouched, just to reorder it when I came on shift. How his eyes followed me, tracking my every movement. I brushed it off. Just another lonely customer. Another man with an unspoken fantasy about the goth barista behind the counter. It was Halloween night. The cafe was nearly empty, the usual chatter replaced by an eerie quiet. He came up to the counter, ordered his drink, but this time he added a cinnamon scone. It was strange, he never did that. And as I handed it to him, something about his smile made my stomach tighten. Minutes later, he returned, asking for a pen and paper, something important, he said. I pointed him to customer service and thought nothing of it. But when he came back, he had blank sheets in his hand, sheets he never used. As closing time neared, he remained in his seat, his dishes untouched. I was alone in the cafe, waiting, pretending not to notice. Then, finally, he stood, gathered his things, and approached the counter. I positioned myself behind the bake case, a barrier between us. He handed me his plate, but wouldn't let go. His pale blue eyes locked onto mine, his grip tightening. "Trick or treat," he whispered. A shiver ran down my spine. I forced a smile, yanked the plate from his grasp. He just chuckled. "Happy Halloween," he murmured before leaving. I exhaled, relieved. But the nightmare wasn't over yet. As I walked to my car, I thought it was over. I was wrong. Something was wedged beneath my door handle, a folded note. My pulse pounded as I sat inside, locked the doors, and unfolded it. The words sent ice through my veins. "Don't worry about how I knew which car was yours. I think you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. I know you feel the same way." My stomach twisted. No one had told him which car was mine. He had already known. I didn't go home that night. I met a coworker at a Walmart parking lot, told my boyfriend, and stayed at a friend's place. The next morning, I gave the note to my manager. They took it seriously, warning the staff. The man never came back. But that doesn't mean he stopped watching. That Halloween, I learned that some monsters don't wear masks. They sit in the corner, sip their coffee, and wait.